The news spread fast across the globe. A new pope had been chosen. The bells of the basilica rang out, and his name echoed through TVs, cell phones, and radios around the world. But for those familiar with obscure historical records, this event is more than just a religious turning point. Something deeper might be happening beneath the surface. One detail in particular draws attention. Decades ago, one of the most influential minds in psychology, Carl Jung, left behind a little-known prophecy. It aligns eerily with what's happening today. In one of his lesser-known writings, Jung described a time when a shift in spiritual leadership would signal something far greater, something just beginning to unfold. At first glance, this transition might seem symbolic, but Jung believed it marked the start of a cycle that would most deeply affect those over 60. His words were overlooked for years, likely dismissed as too distant or abstract. But now, as a new leader is introduced to the world, those forgotten words carry new weight. Jung warned that this global spiritual realignment would usher in a sensitive chapter for humanity, especially for the older generation. He wasn't predicting chaos or disaster, but rather a profound internal shift, a reevaluation of values, a call for emotional and spiritual readiness. To many, that might sound vague, but for those truly paying attention, the signs are already here. If you're still watching, now's the time to subscribe and hit that like button. These are the types of insights we dive into, stories that don't often make headlines but hold deep meaning for those willing to look closer. The prophecy doesn't end here. Jung continued by saying that, after the rise of new spiritual leadership, older individuals would face a choice: stay stuck in fear or awaken to a new way of seeing life. He foresaw a moment where traditional belief systems would be tested not by conflict from the outside, but by an internal shift spreading through millions of people. People would start asking deeper questions. What really matters? What happens after we die? Why are we here? These questions, he said, would make many uncomfortable, but also open the door to a kind of peace that only comes with lived experience. And now, with the naming of the new pope, those words feel less like poetry and more like a quiet but powerful call. To Jung, this moment wasn't one of fear, but of clarity. He believed that many older people would intuitively sense a change in the air, not a visible shift, but something inside, as if time itself was asking for a more honest, more soulful response. Structures of faith that once felt solid would begin to be quietly re-examined. This wouldn't mean losing one's faith, but reconnecting with what faith really is. Jung saw this as a sacred passage from the seen world to the unseen, a quiet ending of one cycle and the subtle start of another. Those who embraced the process with courage, he said, would become quiet guides for the younger generations, not through advice, but through example, through the peace that comes from living honestly and deeply. This change wouldn't come all at once. It would be like the slow setting of the sun, a shift in light that only becomes clear when we realize that night has arrived. Jung also referenced a symbolic figure tied to the Vatican. He didn't name names or countries, but described someone who would bring a feeling of renewal. When a new pope appears with both compassion and firmness, Jung said, that's when this cycle begins. Looking at today's pope, it's hard not to notice the alignment with Jung's description, and it's a reminder, even actions that don't dominate the headlines can hold deep spiritual weight. In this vision, the new pope isn't a distant authority. He's a seen reminder that real change always begins within. Jung wasn't fatalistic. He didn't believe in doomed fates or unavoidable tragedies. He believed that every person carries the power to free themselves, especially those who've lived through much, seen the world evolve, and endured both loss and renewal. In fact, he said this group, those over 60, possess a kind of sensitivity younger people haven't yet developed. And when that sensitivity is accepted, it turns into wisdom. But when it's ignored, it can become anxiety. That's why so many older people today carry a quiet heaviness without knowing why. Jung saw that pain not as a burden, but as a signal, a spiritual call asking to be heard. And the only way to hear it is through stillness, through a willingness to listen from within. This new Pope arrives at a time when millions of people over 60 are silently searching for meaning. Maybe not out loud, maybe not even consciously, but through a restlessness that rises during the quiet moments of the day. And this, Jung believed, was no coincidence. Global shifts don't just happen randomly. There's a kind of intelligence behind what seems political or religious. When a new figure steps into power, especially one from a symbolically powerful place like the Vatican, something inside many people is stirred. He believed older people would feel this more than others, not because they're weaker, but because they're closer to life's essence. Those who lean into that feeling with curiosity would discover insights no textbook can offer. To Jung, aging wasn't about decline. It was about a return back to what truly matters. As life slows down and external demands fade, the soul becomes easier to see. He urged older people not to drown in distractions, but to reconnect with what lasts. To some, the new Pope may seem like just another leader, but to those who look deeper, he's a signal, an invitation to renew personal faith. Not faith in institutions, but faith in one's own ability to grow, evolve, and make a difference. That's why Jung believed this phase of life could be the most meaningful of all if lived with openness, courage, and humility to begin again, even late in life. Even if you've never heard of Carl Jung, his insights resonate, because they speak to something universal. We all, at some point, question our worth, especially as we age. Does it still matter? Do we still have something to offer? And his answer was firm. Yes, as long as you're alive, your presence has value. But that value doesn't have to be loud or grand. Sometimes it's in a gentle gaze, a calm word, or a memory shared at just the right time. These small things change lives. Jung believed the world needs this now more than ever. In an age of speed and noise, the steady presence of someone who's seen it all and still believes in kindness is a gift, and it's one the older generation still has in abundance. He also emphasized that history's biggest shifts often begin with small signs, a change in leadership, a new name announced. These moments, though quiet, carry weight, and those who are paying attention will feel it. That's why he stressed the importance of keeping the mind awake. Wisdom isn't about how much you know, it's about how deeply you notice what's right in front of you. And today, more than ever, that kind of awareness matters. Those who've lived through life's seasons know when something has shifted. If they can't quite name it, that's where the prophecy finds its value. Not as a prediction of doom, but as a gentle compass. For those over 60, the message is simple. It doesn't matter whether you believe in prophecies or belong to a certain faith. What matters is that you're listening, recognizing that this moment in history carries more than symbolism, holds an invitation, a quiet call to live with more awareness, more presence, and more honesty. The naming of the new Pope is not the end of something, but the beginning of something larger, a deep, personal movement, a cycle of inner reflection that can transform the life of anyone ready to truly look inward. Carl Jung once said that the later years of life can be the richest if they are lived with intention. And perhaps by noticing what's happening now, you'll realize there's still a great deal left to do. Not out in the world, but inside. Because the real transformation begins there, in the silence of your own soul. Life, as Jung reminded us, doesn't end with age. It grows deeper. What many see as a closing chapter may actually be the beginning of a new stage of awareness. It's not about denying the body or pretending time hasn't passed, but about seeing that the soul is still alive, still curious, still capable of evolving. By paying attention to what's happening around us, like the election of a new pope, we have a choice to stay in the habit of watching passively, or to begin interpreting the world with an open heart, using the wisdom gained from years lived, because in everything, even in what feels far removed from us, there are messages, there are lessons. When we view life this way, each gesture, each global event, each quiet shift becomes a sinner reminder that there is still time to learn, still time to grow, and still time to offer something meaningful. Jung never demanded belief. He simply invited reflection. He urged each of us to find our own truth, especially those who have lived long enough to know that time is a precious gift. His prophecy wasn't about fear. It was about making the present matter more than ever. By linking this vision to the emergence of a new spiritual leader, Jung reminds us, nothing happens by accident. Every ending carries the seed of a new beginning, if we meet it with consciousness, and if you're still here, if you followed this message to the end, maybe, just maybe, you felt that same quiet pull. Life doesn't ask for perfect answers. It asks for awareness. It asks that we listen to the voice inside us that stirs when the world begins to shift, that we choose from that place, choose wisely. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone else who may need a moment of reflection. Sometimes, all it takes to change the path of one life is one new idea, a different way of seeing what's already in front of us. And if Jung was right, now is the time to pay attention. Not outward, inward. Too many, the new pope is just a figure in the news. But to those truly watching, he's something more, a symbol of awakening, a mirror for our own internal seasons. And especially if you are over 60, carry within you what the world so desperately needs, lived wisdom. May that wisdom rise, may it take root, and may this new chapter in your life begin with the understanding that it's never too late to awaken.